substitute cookies or good jobs or whatever else. Would you do this? I think if you would not, you either made a fortune during the dot-com era or you are unbelievably rebellious, defiant. Most people would say, you kidding? Of course. See, rewards work. And they do, sometimes. They work to get exactly one thing: temporary compliance, but at significant cost. Rewards and punishments are both ways of doing things to kids. And the question that kids come to ask in households or classrooms where they are offered positive reinforcement for doing what the adult demands, the question they come to ask is, what do they want me to do? Remember what it was with punishment? What do they want me to do and what happens to me if I don't do it? When rewards are used, the question is, what do they want me to do and what do I get for doing it? It's still about self-interest. I said before, punishment is one of the two great ways to make kids self-centered. The other one is rewards. The same idea. 2 studies have found that children who are frequently rewarded or praised by their parents are less generous and helpful than their peers on average. And the effect is most pronounced when they're rewarded or praised for being generous. Good sharing. I really like the way you let Patty play with your toy, too. He just became a little less likely to share when no one's around to give him a pat on the head for it. The desire to help begins to erode when kids see themselves as doing it in order to get the reward, even if it's a verbal reward. In fact, one of the first studies on this was done at Stanford University, in which it turned out that kids were a lot less likely to draw with magic markers when they were presented with a nice certificate with a red ribbon and a gold star for drawing with magic markers. They used to like it, and now it's just a means to an end. And the same thing is true of reading, helping, or anything else that you would care to name. In fact, some 70 studies by now have found the more you reward people for doing something, the more they tend to lose interest in whatever they had to do to get the reward. So rewards are not the answer. In fact, we might even think about a continuum. Imagine, on this end of the continuum, we have physical abuse of children. Over here, we have spanking and slapping that falls short of the legal requirements for abuse. Over here, we have other ways of making kids unhappy, not letting them play with a toy, making them go to their room, other punishments that aren't physical. Over here, we have rewards where we dangle goodies in front of them if they do what we tell them to do. And over here, we have verbal rewards, the infamous good job, when they mindlessly obey. I'm not suggesting that praise is morally equivalent to abuse, but I am saying there is a conceptual connection, and these are all firmly on the doing to side. So now the question becomes, what else? What does it mean to talk about working with? Now, I have to preface some broad suggestions for what I think is not only more respectful, but a heck of a lot more effective, by thinking that we have to focus on what we're looking for. When you ask me, what's the alternative? I immediately have to ask you, alternative to get what? Are you just interested in compliance? Even then, better to do some of the things I'm about to mention. Though again, if it's short-term, mindless compliance with resentment you want, maybe you're not ready to give up the rewards and the punishments. I want to emphasize that that's true, because what I mean by that is we have to not merely look for new tricks to control children. It's the desire merely to get control that has to be called into question, and you have to ask yourself, what is more important? Getting the kid to do the homework today? Getting the kid to put the dishes in the sink? Getting the kid into the bathtub on time? Getting the teenager to call you on the cell phone when he promised he would? Or is it Kids who love learning, have a purpose, are independent, happy, resilient, confident, engaged, fulfilled, good human beings, passionate, and self-actualized. You got to think about the long-term stuff, because years from now you will forget the day that the homework was or wasn't done. But this is the stuff that doesn't fade. There's no recipe for this. Throw away any book or article. It tells you, when your child does this, you should stand here and say in this tone of voice the following. That is profoundly disrespectful not only to children, but to you. To say nothing of simply ludicrous because there's so much variation. Punishments and rewards are popular in part because they pretend to be a one-size-fits-all solution. That's part of why they don't work very well either. We have to get to where the trouble is, which punishments and rewards never do. So I'm not going to give you a recipe. I will also warn you, as I already have, that working with kids is more challenging. And it's more challenging because it requires us to look beneath behavior. Cohn's first law of reading parenting books. I was waiting for somebody else to give it that name, but nobody did, so I'm going to have to do it. Cohn's first law of reading parenting books. The more times the word behavior appears, the less valuable the book probably is. I worry when I hear the constant talk about behavior. That's the real legacy of B.F. Skinner, not just the use of reinforcers, of Rice Krispies to get kids or whatever, or rats, organisms to emit the correct behavior. The real problem with behaviorism is that it says there's nothing to us other than behavior you can see and measure. Anything else is fiction or an illusion, or at least useless to talk about. Most of us think that's bizarre. We don't act that way in our lives. We think of behavior as just the outward manifestation of thoughts and feelings, of history and will and intention. That's why we try to raise children. We don't just try to reinforce or extinguish behavior. Or do we? Do we act as though we really were Skinnerians? We certainly do if we buy books that teach us how to potty train our kids in 30 days or 30 minutes or whatever it is, by offering them a star chart, little stars on a chart, or M&Ms or praise or something. Those books are not about helping children. They're about producing behaviors as though we were house